I have a new clicker. I'm really excited about it. It's pretty cool. Okay, so I just want to start off with a little bit of a review of what we did. So this part 2, we're going to identify the spiral dynamic theory worldview constructs that are in tier 2. And I think with you guys, I left off at the end of tier 1 at orange. So I do want to give you an opportunity if you're offended by like profanity, because I took a clip from the Wolves of Wall Street to represent that worldview construct. I wanted to give you a heads up on that. So if you want to like leave or something, you can do that. And so
there was a question about the videotape. They didn't know that they wouldn't do it without permission.
I'm sorry.
Just
Oh,
It's only on her, guys.
Oh,
It's not facing you.
no, it's on me. You're still anonymous. Okay.
I just wanted to.
Oh yes, that's good. That's good to know, because I know some of you might.
It looks like Bethany was in
And
the
Dr.
video.
Gray.
Oh yeah, the way it was set up in the other one.
No, right now.
It is. Oh, you can see it.
Yes.
Okay.
You can see what
Are you guys?
here,
Are you guys
Oh,
okay?
okay.
Okay. Nobody has any FBI most wanted. Okay, good. Okay, so let's start off being a little philosophical, because I didn't talk about this with you all last time, and I think it'll be helpful. So let's talk about some basic terms when we start talking about people's worldview. What is a paradigm in your view? Anybody can answer. What do you think a paradigm is? Yes, ma'am.
A cultural understanding. Yeah.
Okay, that works. Anybody else want to add or build on
I
that?
would kind of say based on your experiences.
Based on your experiences, okay. Now, this was, when you go to graduate school, all these new terms that, you never hear before, but you don't want to seem like you don't know. This is one of them for me. And so I thought that'd be nice if I provided some context of what a paradigm is. A paradigm is a worldview. Can everybody see? A paradigm is a worldview or perspective that includes one's axiology. That's another one of them big graduate school words. And axiologies represent our values, our ontologies, or the nature of reality. And it also includes your epistemology. And the epistemology is the method, validation, and scope of determining knowledge that separates it from opinion. Okay? And so, going a little bit deeper with the word ontology, I was reading some literature. So, an ontology, which is the nature of reality, is part of a worldview. And we're talking about spiral dynamic theory having these various worldviews. It has been described in the academic literature and some academic literature as having 3 domains, or 3 depths, if you will. You have the empirical ontology, the actual ontology, and the real ontology, with the latter being formed by the 2 former. So, just as a review, we went over Bayes, remember? So that was the one where we talked about being motivated by these physiological imperatives. It is a pre-cultural existence, it's individualistic, and there is no self-awareness at this stage. The next stage involved the more magical, mystical worldview, and is characterized by safety, tribalism, and traditionalism. And y'all remember that video I shared. On this one, you have the power impulsive, domination, and force being a feature of this particular worldview. And this is the first stage where an individual becomes self-aware. And so I think I should. Did we get to watch this one? The blue one?
Yes.
Okay. So this was the purposeful, saintly, absolutism, and dogmatic order. So that was the blue spiral dynamic worldview. So we're picking up today on, I wanted to ask y'all a question. I forgot about this. Does anybody know what this is?
Paddle. We got feet with.
We got beat with, right?
For Trinity paddle.
Okay. So y'all remember where I talked about memetics being evolutionary? So you have like this evolution from the ruler to this paddle to the one with the little holes in it. Isn't that interesting? I wonder what the holes do aerodynamically, because I was like, does it let you get to the bottom quicker? But what was fascinating to me is that it wasn't until 2009 that Governor Strickland outlawed the use of corporal punishment in Ohio. And so in 2009, he signed legislation that said you could not exercise corporal punishment in public education, but you still can in private education. So corporal punishment and the use of these devices are still, legal.
Yeah, but if you
That's
did,
what's wrong with these kids.
you'd end up in, you would get fired.
We're talking about free thinking adults here. I'll just share with you what the reality is and to try to help you see the mimetic relationship here, because I'm gonna revisit this. Because someone said something about it being kind of, barbaric, right? No, you said you for it?
I said B.
Okay. Well, okay, so just for your information, there are still 19 states, those in red, that still allow corporal punishment in public education. Did y'all know that? Isn't it fascinating? Okay. So I'm going to move to the mnemonic orange, which is the strategic, more manipulative worldview. So in this worldview, there is a valuing of autonomy, profiteering, and independence. There's also attention towards seeking the good life through gaining material abundance. There is an emphasis on methodical search for the best solution in terms of facing a problem. And there's this belief that there is this best way to do it. It privileges science and technology as tools for obtaining enhanced living. And there's an enjoyment of competition. One is motivated to play to win, and there's much satisfaction gained in winning. It shows constraint risk, unlike what we saw in the red spiral dynamic theory worldview, where you had that unconstrained risk. So you have constraint risk and manipulation in order to achieve success. But what's interesting is that this person wants to not be known for that. So there's more attention to be more clandestine in holding these views and more hidden. But they are very much a part of what motivates this particular worldview. This worldview values learning from tried and true experiences and research decision making. So let me go ahead and share this little clip that I felt represented that worldview very well.
All right, I want you to focus for a second. See those little black boxes? They're called telephones. I'm gonna let you on a little secret about these telephones.
Everybody see that?
They're not gonna dial themselves, okay? Without you, they're just worthless hunks of plastic. Like a loaded M16 without a trained Marine to pull the trigger. And in the case of the telephone, it's up to each and every one of you, my highly trained Stratonites. My killers who will not take no for an answer. My fucking warriors who will not hang up the phone until their client either buys or fucking dies! Let me tell you something. There is no nobility in poverty. I have been a rich man and I have been a poor man, and I choose rich every fucking time. Because at least as a rich man, when I have to face my problems, I show up in the back of a limo wearing a $2,000 suit and a $40,000 gold fucking watch. As always, dig it out! Him! Fuck off of me! Now, if anyone here thinks I'm superficial or materialistic, go get a job at fucking McDonald's, because that's where you fucking belong. But before you depart this room full of winners, I want you to take a good look at the person next to you. Go on. Because sometime in the not so distant future, you're going to be pulling up to a red light and you beat up old fucking Pinot, and that person's going to be pulling up right alongside you in their brand new Porsche with their beautiful wife by their side who's got big voluptuous tits. And who are you going to be sitting next to? Some disgusting wildebeest with 3 days of razor stubble and a sleeveless moo crammed in next to you in a carload full of groceries from the fucking Price Club. That's who you're going to be sitting next to. So you listen to me and you listen well. Are you behind on your credit card bills? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Is your landlord ready to evict you? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Does your girlfriend think you're a fucking worthless loser? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. I want you to deal with your problems by becoming rich. All you have to do today is pick up that phone and speak the words that I have taught you. And I will make you richer than the most powerful CEO in the United States of fucking America. I want you to go out there and I want you to ram Steve Madden's stock down your clients' throats till they fucking choke on it. Till they choke on it and they buy 100,000 shares. That's what I want you to do. You be ferocious. You be relentless. You be telephone fucking terrorist. Now let's knock this motherfucker out of the park.
So, of course, yes.
So, since what if you could name someone within this school building or the district that would fall under that category? What it could be a principal or who would that be?
Okay.
Just so I can associate it with.
Oh, absolutely, and that's part of what I'm doing in the third part of this. I'm giving you scenarios.
Okay.
So you have this principal who has come into the school district, and he's improved the air test scores, he's improved attendance, he's improved discipline, and he's a micromanager. And so he goes into the classroom and sometimes embarrasses teachers when they're not doing the kind of pedagogical approaches that he feels like they should be using. Or he'll tell the teacher if a student is misbehaving, keep him in the classroom because I don't want to increase my, what are those forms we fill out?
Referral.
Yeah, referrals, but we had to name it. So if that kind of stuff, because that person's concerned about the numbers. He's not gonna cuss them out like that, hopefully. But so you saw the materialism, right? And you saw the competition. And can you see how the person in red would admire that person? Because they're showing this power, they're showing this control, they're a winner, And he even uses words like winner. And he talks about what's so ironic is like in spiral dynamic theory, the theory holds that most people oscillate between three orientations. So that person could be orange, green, or orange, blue, and red, or orange, green, and yellow. I found that he was more like orange, blue, and red. And that's because he talks about this purposeful ideal. I've been poor. Remember he talked about that? And being rich is better. So that's kind of like a noble idea, but he says, do you want to be buying your food at the Price Club, or do you want to pull up in a Mercedes or whatever, So there's this small element of righteous living or purposeful living or, not being in poverty as a means for living one's life, which some might consider noble, but he's so extreme in the other areas that that aspect of who he is not as pronounced. Yes, ma'am.
So the creator of this spiral dynamic theory, did he think that it was that intense, or are you just showing us these intense over-the-top videos to get us to understand it? Because I have a hard time believing that everybody goes through a phase where they're that over the top.
Everybody doesn't get there.
Okay.
And
because,
so
I've been materialistic before. I mean, I think everyone maybe has experienced that once, but
yes,
that's a little crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the videos that we've seen, I think it was the Native American woman. I can't say everybody's done that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Of course.
So
I respect and appreciate that. And see, what happens too with these constructs is some people, Claire Graves held that change was not inevitable. You can live out your existence on one particular worldview. To be honest with you, like you said, most, in my experiences, teachers fall in this area, so they would be uncomfortable most times with this kind of worldview. And so this is just to give you a full scope of the framework. Depending on where you're at in your worldview, some of this might not make sense to you, or you can't identify with it. Especially when I go to tier 2 and start talking about bioengineering and nanotechnology integrating with human biology. That's out there. But I believe it's a part of this worldview development.
Where'd you say teachers usually?
In blue.
This.
Blue and green.
Yeah, that's a.
Yep, blue and green. So, just to bring it down a notch, 'cause that is intense. And what's so fascinating is you can emotionally feel these shifts. Now, you're about to see a green one. So it's going to be a lot more collectivist, a lot more along the lines of where most teachers and helping professionals probably see themselves. So in this particular construct, you're exploring the inner being of self in connection to that of others. That's held in high priority. You're looking to promote a sense of community and unity. The spiral dynamic green worldview has an orientation that gives attention to sharing the resources of the society among all. There is this desire to seek to liberate humans from greed, orange system, and imposing dogma, blue system. Decisions are reached through group consensus building, attention to the ecosystem and the natural environment, values spirituality that is unimposing in pursuit of harmony. So let me share with you that next clip.
Communal living, while pretty prominent within a certain particular type of privileged millennial, is a thing.
Yeah.
We have the belief that it's actually something that will be more mainstream within a certain amount of years' time. I think what we're trying to do is lay the infrastructure by which non-traditional communities can go ahead and embrace this style of living.
So it definitely should not just be millennial white dudes.
No.
Everyone in New York is super lonely. That may be why communal living is having a moment. More and more people are passing up studio apartments to live in group housing, sometimes paying more to do so. One company in Williamsburg, known as Pure House, brands itself as an intentional living community.
We're in a former old doll factory. It's been turned into a bunch of artist lofts. I hope it's haunted, but it hasn't been yet.
For New Yorkers whose identities have been swallowed up by the vast nothingness of the city, Pure House promises to focus on curating distinct groups of people and their passions.
Hi.
Sam, good to meet you. Good to meet you, Sam.
Membership in Pure House gets you a private bedroom in one of 3 homes located within walking distance in Williamsburg.
We have to do your low house.
It's a low ceiling, but it's high enough to stand up. Do you think this is a growing movement in the country, or is it still happening in little pockets?
I mean, communal living has been going on for centuries.
Yeah, since we were living together in caves.
But what's happening now, and this is part of a huge shift, I mean, our lives have become so efficient, and now people are looking for more meaning, more purpose, more community, more connection, more culture, connection with themselves and others. This is what I think is fueling this growing movement, and there are all these different gradients. So on the We Live side, we're talking about what I think of as kind of like condo living 2.0, but there isn't any kind of a operating system, so to speak, that allows for some sort of a kind of communal experience. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have intentional communities, the kinds of things that are referred to as communes. Things like Pure House tend to be more in the middle.
Rooms at Pure House range between $1,500 and $1,800 and include occasional meals, yoga, and massages. By comparison, the more corporate communal housing at We Live in Lower Manhattan runs about $1,700 with no massages. You could rent a room in New York for cheaper, but these places provide intangibles that seem worthwhile to a lot of people, like this weekly dinner where they talk about sex.
Is there a sexual act you really enjoy doing?
When you're about to go down on a partner, but like you're kissing their stomach and like holding anticipation as you're working your way down, and like.
What brought you to Pure House?
When I moved to New York the first year, I was alone. I felt alone, doesn't matter how many people I met in school, and I feel that I don't have any kind of home to go back to. I was looking for an apartment, and then I found Pure House on one of the apps, and I got to the website, and I was like, that's what I want to.
What do you think is behind the movement?
With
gone from a society of like belonging to like a very individualistic society, but that feeling of wanting to belong somewhere doesn't necessarily go away. This allows you kind of the best of both worlds. There is a sense of belonging because everyone's passionate, but there is a sense of diversity where everyone's passionate about something else.
About different things.
Yeah.
Not about only about sharing the spaces. I think it's about sharing the conscious, of like we are a group, we are like, a community, and we help each other, we provide to each other.
Yeah.
I think it would be ideal for society to be a little bit more open and
more communal.
More communal.
And recognize that humanity is one common
Yeah,
body.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
We
the
are
final
not all
answer.
these
We all are
separate
one.
individuals.
We all are one.
Right, right.
So
And yet
it's
if you
like,
just go like yelling that on the subway platform, people look at you funny.
Yeah.
They should.
They should.
The fact that people are willing to pay more to share space than to have their own is telling. Social interaction is fundamental, a prerequisite for good health, and people are realizing that.
We're kind of restarting this mission at the beginning being like, what happens when you value share in a space where not everyone is white?
Remains to be seen.
It remains to be seen. Check in with us in like, a year.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. So it seems like the key to a good communal living experience is diversity. And of course, you want to make sure you're not joining a cult.
Yeah,
All
I'll
right.
talk you through it. We're doing just eye gazing, and it's just way simple. You're already doing it, and it's great.
I know. I make eye contact all the
Yeah.
time.
So just like take your hand and just like put it on your lower belly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything in my eyes? Because people tell me like I'm not human or whatever.
I see that you're not blinking a lot.
Okay.
So I always ask people after watching that, how would you classify the guy who was kind of narrating? If you had to identify him on the spiral dynamic theory framework, what would you think he was in his orientation? Orange, green, okay. Nobody thinks blue? He seems a little weary of that, approach to living. Like they were a little kind of out there. I thought he was a little bit more reserved, which was more representative of the blue spiral dynamic theory worldview. I certainly did not see him as orange. Whoever saw him as orange. Who said orange?
I said orange.
Why?
Because I guess I took it as him gathering information. So gathering information, so that would be conquering the physical world. I don't know, like this is a physical, this is an environment. So
Right.
intellectually conquering the physical.
Yeah. Yeah, but I saw him as more on the cooler side than the warmer side. But I can see how you could think that. Yeah. He was collecting information, but not to be manipulative. Not to get an advantage over anyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've just finished the first tier. And so recently, I just like finding newspaper clippings. So there is a story about a teacher in New York who singled out the black students and stepped on them and walked over them during a lesson on slavery in order to help them understand slavery. First of all, yes ma'am.
I just have a question. So throughout this presentation, there have been a lot of things brought up about racism. Multiple times. Does racism have anything to do with spiral dynamic theory?
Yes, because racism happens on each level and it expresses itself differently.
Okay.
And I
This
also
is brought up a lot. So
yeah,
I'm just curious
it's a
how
big
that-
part of society, and I think that as educators, we are expected to be able to deal with diverse groups. And as part of that dealing with diverse groups, it really requires us to get out of our comfort zone sometimes in our interpretation of how the world is and try to understand how it is for the students and the parents we might engage, especially if you're talking about urban education. Yes, sir.
Oh, I was going to say, is it possible, because you said it's expressed differently, I don't know if this is like a bad question or not, but like, is it possible that like there might be people who so they might be white or whatever, and they have, I guess, racist tendencies, but not even like know that they have them per se. Like they're, like would red might be more.
Yeah. I think that a person in each particular worldview can express their prejudice. Like, you could, in red, be a part of Ku Klux Klan. You could, in blue, think that black people are cursed. You know, that is a doctrine of, has been a doctrine of the Mormon Church. And so you could, in green, kind of like the one guy said at the beginning, so it's about more than just millennial white guys. And they giggled. And then the girl also said in the video too, people form communities with people they're comfortable with. So it's not to say that they are overt racists. We have a tendency to connect with people we feel comfortable with. And so as a result of that, if you have no exposures of people who are different from you, then you have a tendency to avoid trying to connect in that way. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And so,
not to me.
Yes, ma'am.
So this has to do with race. So this is talking about like racism, or is this?
This is talking about the way that people view the world, the values that they hold in priority, and how they problem solve as a function of the values.
Oh, so you're connecting it to racism, but this isn't all. It's not only about racism. Those are just the videos that.
What is making you think it's being connected to racism?
Oh, because every video seems to talk about race. And I just thought I was thinking that due to how long they are, because they dress race, like this had to do with some type of like.
That's why I'm.
Oh, I understand. So yeah, earlier when I talked about the paddles, does that connect to race?
No.
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 Okay. Well,
so earlier, no, I'm just asking because sometimes we tend to zero in on sensitive subjects that are sensitive to us, and I tend not to avoid them because we're going to be teachers. We're going to be going into these inner city situations. So I guess I just kind of put it out there and we try to talk about it together.
But the one thing that I saw in that Wall Street was more sexism.
Yeah, there was no racism in that one.
You describe a woman this way and you describe a woman that way. I have a problem.
It is problematic.
I have a serious problem with that.
Yeah.
And not to discuss that is not.
Good point.
It's not good to me.
Yeah, and I think, thank you, Mark, for bringing that. I think we do tend to zero in on the things that might be sensitive to us, and so it might seem.
Well, maybe it's because I have 3 daughters.
Yeah, yeah, because
I am very cognizant of how they are.
Yeah,
right.
But are we going to act like these people don't exist and don't hold these views that we interact with in the world?
I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think I'm one like more sensitive to like racism or I'm just saying with the videos that we've seen, sometimes it's hard to connect it to what you're teaching us because of the content. Like I get not every single one of yours was racism. They was the paddle or the sexism or the whatever. But regardless, like I think I'm just getting lost trying to fit in what the take from it due to like the content of the do you know?
Yeah, I do. I appreciate that. And let's revisit it as we go on and tell me if that still becomes concern.
So this teacher
did
walk on them physically?
Yeah, the teacher walked on the children physically. Now she was removed from the classroom.
Sure.
But this goes to your question you asked me earlier. Is this applicable to younger people? If these children laid down to be walked on, which one of the spiral dynamic theory worldviews do you think it applies to?
The following people's orders.
Yes, the blue one. Isn't that fascinating? And the fact that the teacher walked on the students, which one do you think that applied to? Orange? Well, no. I don't see that as a lot of complexity in doing that. Right. I would see it more as red. It was this power imposition, right? And then her mind, I haven't looked real.
Self-awareness.
Huh?
It was living with self-awareness.
Yeah.
But that's not very being self-aware.
Who, her?
Yeah.
She was aware of herself in relationship to those students.
She was aware that she had more power over
yes,
the students, for sure.
Absolutely.
Or she'd have never done,
those type of people, she would have still done it, regardless.
She might have. But isn't this fascinating that we're having this discussion? I mean, these are some of the things we tend to avoid because it's hard for us to believe that people do it. But I'm showing you evidence for February 2018 where somebody did that. And I think it's important for us to realize. It is, isn't it, as disturbing? Yes. But, I'm just, I'm the messenger.
What state did it happen in?
New York. So here is an incident where a student got expelled from school for sitting during the Pledge of Allegiance. And remember where I talked about memes and that memes can travel, right? And they're not necessarily image memes all the time. They can be ideas. So for her to be expelled from school, what could potentially be the mimetic worldview in operation there? To suspend this student for sitting down during the Pledge of Allegiance.
We have only one value and faith system, and that one is ours. And if you don't comply, you're
What
out.
color would it be?
Blue.
You got it, sis. Okay, perfect. And I just thought that was a really good example of that. And I said this earlier when I first came in here. Educational systems tend to be very traditional, and they're about following the rules and following order. This last one. This is in Texas. You have a high school student teacher that was removed after allegedly hitting a student with a belt. The student spit on him. He took his belt off and whooped him.
I guess it depends on what state you're in.
You just
It
said
was Texas.
you said in capital punishment in schools is okay in the South according to the law.
In some
Corporal punishment, there are standards. You just can't whoop people with a belt. They literally took those paddles, and there are dynamics that the paddles have to meet.
Oh, I was just.
And there's a certain area of the butt where you have to hit.
Right.
You can't bust the belt out and just start whipping people. So if you think about that, what kind of worldview would that teacher have been operating from? To take, now, bear in mind, the student supposedly rubbed his head and spit on him.
A normal one, because I would whip them too.
Okay, that's interesting. So some people, man, you know what? You will find this as a, let me say this is important. You will find this as a cultural conflict. Because you have some inner city minority families who don't have no problem with whipping their kids. And I have been on the phone with teachers. I was talking to them about their child, and they said, I'm going to beat her. I said, ma'am, please don't say that to me as an official of the school, because I will have to report that to somebody, because you're talking about doing bodily harm to your child. But there are some, and this becomes a real bone of contention culturally, because some people culturally could be from Appalachian, West Virginia, and there's no problem with whooping your kids, or you can be a black person who grew up, and some have argued it has a legacy of slavery associated with that, you know, normalization of hitting your kids. And so, you know, I very much think that this teacher was operating in the blue and red systems for sure, because he saw spare the rod, spoil the child. Or he could have been just exerting his power in red,
But
because the child had spit on him.
But if you look at his thinking, though, me as a normal person, it wouldn't even be spare the rod. It would be my morals and my self-respect.
But both of those are still moral. You said your morals and your self-respect. People say the Bible says spare the rod, spoil the child. That's a moral judgment.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely.
What about beige? And this is why I went beige, because if someone's, I don't know, I think some of us may have a natural instinct if we feel physically threatened to respond that way.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking beige as a basic instinctive.
Mm-hmm. I can appreciate that, because there is an element, and remember, these systems are subsuming. So what happens is beige gets buried down in you, and you don't draw on beige because that's not how you operate in life.
Yeah.
But I can see that argument, but beige does not have the intellectual sophistication to be a teacher.
Okay.
You're talking about homeless people who will talk to themselves in pidgin, or children who just have the imperative of poop, eat, and cry. You know? So there's a little bit more neurological sophistication happening than what you would see at the beige level for someone who would be a teaching professional. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to tier 2, yeah! And so what's interesting about tier 2 is it probably is more comfortable for most people here, because you're looking at higher order thinking. So we're not looking to resolve problems and conflict through an imposition of power, through maybe violence and things like that. What's fascinating in terms of how Claire describes this level is that once we reach the tier 2 level, you start to see more integration. In other words, you are able to more easily identify these systems in other people. when you tend to be at the subsistence level, sometimes you can't identify and relate to those people because it's so weird how they think. But when you start getting this upper level, you have integrated and expanded your neurological capacities that you are able to look at and understand what's happening there without necessarily making a judgment, but being able to respond effectively to it. And ideally, that's the kind of leadership you would want to see and place in a free-thinking society. So, again, the system moves from simplistic thinking to complex higher-order thinking. You can have integration of more than one system in operation at a time, but usually there is a dominant system in terms of how you view the world. So you may have some elements of red, but you probably are more dominant in blue, and you may have a smidgen of orange, because the movement is hierarchical, right, and it's in a spiral. Again, I want to reiterate, people can live out the whole of their life at one particular worldview. Claire Grace held that change was not inevitable. And I'm going to talk to you about change dynamics in the last class. You can live your life every day as Homer Simpson and be fine going to work, coming home, and the highlight of your life might be taking your kids to Cedar Point once a year. We should not judge people who think like that. That's their reality. That's their values. And so what's important, I think what makes us more nimble as educators is being able to identify these systems and being able to negotiate them in the context of any problems you might have to face as a teacher or administrator. So this next system, we use Oprah as an example. And so in this system, it's called the system awakening. And I think the way Oprah thinks and articulate is representative of the system. So here you have higher order integration and unifying thinking. Personal being consciousness. You have an acceptance of the inevitability and flex and flow of life and nature. So chaos doesn't upset you and order doesn't upset you. It happens. You respond to it. Understanding dichotomies and the conflicting truths and uncertainties of life is more present in this particular worldview. So you also see an embracing of personal freedoms that do not harm others or overindulgence in self-interest. Even though this is oriented toward the more individualistic system, it's more integral. So you see more representation and more combinations at tier 2 of individualism and collectivism working together. The experiences the fullness of life on earth, recognizing diversity and its multiple facets. It demands the existence of integration over systems that support creativity and promote ingenuity. So that's a priority in this particular worldview. And I feel like her articulations here represent that.
You know, in all of the years of doing the Oprah show, there were many days that I sat in my chair across from 1 or 2 or 5 or 6 or 7 people, and I would be so frustrated because I just wanted to shake people sometimes and say, why didn't you pay attention to your life? I said on the show, probably the producers tell me that they counted 33 times, but I know I thought it at least 1,000 times. I would say listening to your life as it whispers to you first, so that it does not have to knock you upside the head with a brick or come crashing down on you as a brick wall, is one of the greatest principles of life, because there are many things that happen in life that are beyond our control. Natural disasters, death, unexplained events. But there are also many, many, many things in life which we can control and become out of control because you're just not paying attention. You are sleepwalking through your life. And I have seen this so many times on the show. I wanted to take the guests and go, would you just pay attention? So this is what I've learned and how I've explained it to myself. Life whispers to you all the time. Your life is speaking to you all around, from the time you wake up in the morning and every single experience that's coming into your personal space, into your physical space. All of those experiences are speaking to you. They're telling you something about your life and about your circumstances. It whispers, and if you don't get the whisper gets louder. If you don't get the whisper, when it gets louder, it gets, I call it like a little pebble, like a little thump upside your head. When I was a kid, if I was doing something my grandmother didn't like, she'd just turn around and thump me. She wouldn't even look at me. She'd just give me a thump, and I'd know that's my cue to stop it, or we're gonna get worse. The whisper is the message. The pebble or the thump upside the head, usually it's gone into a problem. You don't pay attention to the problem becomes a brick upside your head. The brick upside your head is a crisis. You don't pay attention to the brick upside your head. The crisis turns into a disaster, and the whole house brick wall comes falling down.
I thought that was a really good example. Because did you notice how she, even though she dealt with so much complexity there, and she also still was a little individualistic, right? Because you saw a lot of I statements, but she built up the arguments that she made for someone who had the ability to think in broader ways. I felt that she represented that. Any other feedback on that one? Okay, so our next one, I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. So this system is what's called the holistic worldview. Now, Claire Graves stopped at his yellow and blue constructs, and he really didn't have a lot. So a lot of these have been developed since I've taken over, kind of expanding his framework and the things that I've seen in my research. And so with this particular worldview, you look to find harmony through a strong collectivist individualism. That sounds like an oxymoron, but that's what happens at Tier 2. You start to see this integration and this ability to negotiate smoothly between points of individualism and collectivism in regards to problem solving and living life and negotiating complexity. There's a focus on there's a focus on the good of all living entities as codependent integrated systems. One seeks to expand use of the human brain tool and mind tools and its competencies. There is self becomes part of a larger conscious spiritual whole that also serves the self. It's less sacrificial than the other levels, but there still is this notion of sacrifice associated with this particular worldview construct. Global attention to the natural world where networking is valued, and there is support for minimalist living where less is perceived as more. General life is supreme to individual life in this particular worldview construct. And I feel like he articulates that in his response here.
I'm often asked, and occasionally in an accusatory way, are you atheist? You know, the only ist I am is a scientist. I don't associate with movements. I'm not an ism. I think for myself. The moment once someone attaches you to a philosophy or a movement, then they assign all the baggage and all the rest of the philosophy that goes with it to you. And when you want to have a conversation, they will assert that they already know everything important there is to know about you because of that association. And that's not the way to have a conversation. I'm sorry, it's not. I'd rather we explore each other's ideas in real time, rather than assign a label to it and assert you know what's going to happen in advance. So what people are really after is, what is my stance on religion or spirituality or God? And I would say if I had to find a word that came closest, it would be agnostic. Agnostic, a word dates from the 19th century, Huxley. To refer to someone who doesn't know, but hasn't yet really seen evidence for it, but is prepared to embrace the evidence if it's there, but if it's not, it won't be forced to have to think something that is not otherwise supported. Okay? There are many atheists who say, well, all agnostics are atheists. Like, okay. I'm constantly claimed by atheists. I find this intriguing. In fact, on my wiki page, I didn't create the wiki page, others did, and I'm flattered that people cared enough about my life to assemble it. And it said, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an atheist. I said, well, that's not really true. I said, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an agnostic. Went back a week later, it said Neil Tyson is an atheist again, within a week. And I said, what's up with that? And I said, all right, now I have to word it a little differently. So I said, okay, Neil deGrasse Tyson, widely claimed by atheists, is actually an agnostic. And some will say, well, you're not being fair to the fact that they're actually the same thing. No, they're not the same thing, and I'll tell you why. Atheists I know who proudly wear the badge are active atheists. They're like in-your-face atheists, and they want to change policies, and they're having debates. I don't have the time, the interest, the energy to do any of that. I'm a scientist. I'm an educator. My goal is to get people thinking straight in the first place. Just get you to be curious about the natural world. That's what I'm about. I'm not about any of the rest of this. And it's odd that the word atheist even exists. I don't play golf. Is there a word for non-golf players? Do non-golf players gather and strategize? Do non-skiers have a word and come together and talk about the fact that they don't ski? I can't do that. I can't gather around and talk about how much everybody in the room doesn't believe in God. I don't have the energy for that. And so agnostic separates me from the conduct of atheists, whether or not there's strong overlap between the two categories. And at the end of the day, I'd rather not be any category at all.
Can y'all see the complexity that's increasing in the way that people are thinking and articulating in these worldviews? Now, there's only 2 more left. And so these are the ones that I'm kind of like focused on. They are not based on Claire Gray's work. It's based on my research, the mimetic science literature, and what I'm seeing and hearing out in society. So this construct is used a coral color, and it's called the futurist worldview. And so in this worldview, there's attention to projecting and directing multiple futures. There is this material world that is protected but not exploited. That one in this smart worldview looks for symbiosis between the material world and the natural world and how they need each other. There's attention to bioengineering for health and wealth generation, plus the integration of artificial intelligence all into daily life. So there's this real push for technological integration at this level. Belief in the realm of an intrinsic existence between humans and machines. So this is like that, what is it, Terminator? That whole idea of AI, nanotechnology, making man one with machine. These are the kind of concepts that goes on in the futurist thinking mindset and worldview. There is an attempt to recognize a metaphysical breach that acknowledges somatic being, our senses, our feelings, our fears and emotions, as distinct from artificial intelligence.
Humans and machines have been merging for thousands of years. Right now I'm wearing shoes, I have a microphone on my jacket. We all probably used our phones at least once today. And we communicate with the augmentation of all sorts of amplification and even translation technologies. You can speak into a machine and it'll translate the words you're saying in nearly real time. So I think what might be different in the years to come is a matter of degree, not a matter of kind. One concept that I think is emerging is what I like to call the brain coprocessor, a device that intimately interacts with the brain. It can upload information to the brain and download information from it. Imagine that you could have a technology that could replace lost memories, or augment decision-making, or boost attention or cognition. To do that, though, we have to understand how the brain works at a very deep level. Although over 1/3 patients have had brain implants or neural implants that stimulate the nervous system, so far they've operated in an open loop fashion. That is, they drive activity in the brain, but not in a fully responsive fashion. What we want to do is to have bidirectional communication to the brain. Can you read and write information continuously and supply, maybe through coupling these interfaces to silicon computers, exactly the information the brain needs? My hope is that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to get deep insights, thanks to our technologies, into how brain circuits compute. And that will drive the design of these interfaces so that we can deliver information to the brain and record information from the brain using the natural language of the brain. Reading and writing information in a way that augments, for example, the number of things you can hold in your mind at once, or the ability to recall things nearly perfectly, which is, not an ability so different from looking something up on a search engine on your phone, right? So I think what's going to happen is a continuation of this trend. And I think a lot of people like to talk about artificial intelligence right now. Artificial intelligence, as it stands, is based on a lot of concepts that go back many decades, that build from some very simple observations about the brain. What might AI do, though, once we have incredibly deep insights into the nature of creativity and ethics and other things that the human brain seems to be uniquely equipped for? I think once we start to couple artificial intelligence to the brain that can really augment these uniquely human capabilities, it leads to a new era of what you might call hybrid intelligence. So it won't just be AI running the way in some positive feedback loop. It won't be humans upgrading themselves in the absence of coupling to the world, but I think it'll yield a new kind of symbiosis. And I think that's probably the best possible path. And it's also already, if you look at how people operate in the world, what seems to be one of the most prevalent models.
So this is our last one. And as I said, this framework says you go from very simplistic to more complex thinking. And I think that was representative of the last few people that we saw. Neil deGrasse Tyson is an astrophysicist. This guy is really into human technology integration at MIT. He's a faculty member at MIT. Now this last one is I'll just let it play. So in this one, it's called the wisdom era. So again, we made that permutation back from that individualist choral mindset to the more collectivist. Even though they're starting to become more integrated, there still is this kind of collectivist orientation on the left side of the framework. So here is the teal colored mimetic worldview, and its focus and concept attention is wisdom. So it gives attention to an extraterrestrial existence and life beyond the known terra firma, right? So there holds that individuals form their realities and connections with an omnipresent universal power element, not necessarily a personal God or religious tradition, but sometimes you'll hear people talk about energy, force, universe, things along that line. The spiritual meta being merges with technology at this level. So knowledge acquisition is free and open in order to promote the survival of all life. Emergent cycles of new information or reality precipitate an expanded spiritual and universal exploration. Empathic knowing and ability is digitized in this particular worldview. Oligarchy has no viable purpose in this era. So, this is our last one. And then when I come back, I already shared with you about the flyer.
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business models. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen. The future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
So that level was distinctly different from the previous level because there's a real emphasis on the value and indispensability of human beings. Again, being consistent with the more collectivist mind frame. Where the previous system looked at robotics and maybe AI being able to replace those elements that make us human and being able to replicate that in a more technological way. So I hope you were able to appreciate the differences in the levels. Most of us probably will not be dealing with students who are concerned about those kind of things. But hey, some of you might be STEM educators, I don't know. In any event, Claire Graves held that the majority of people operated at the subsistence level. I think it was fair to say that we probably encountered some of these people. But I think it's pretty clear that some of the examples I gave are more everyday for most of us than not. So that's the end of this part. And so when I come back, we will engage in some examples and critical analysis scenarios. And then I will also explain the change dynamic. What kind of things need to be in place in order to move a person from one level to the next? Thank you for your patience and me going a little bit over time. Are there any questions? Okay. Does anybody need any flyers? Okay. Thank you.